let me thank Manuel Gustavo and Arché and everybody for coming today. Manuel Gustavo in particular for putting together this workshop that is looking up to be a great opportunity for us to discuss. And thank you for the very kind introduction. As Manuel was just saying, I have this one paper on contrasting ameliorations with perversions, and I'm particularly concerned with, as regards implementation, I'm particularly concerned with the political and moral impacts and limitations on meaning revisions. As I've said on other occasions, I have no qualms with meaning revisions within specific theoretical domains that have well-defined goals within a theory that serve particular specific theoretical purposes. I'm more concerned with meaning revisions in the wild as imposed or put forward in a way that affects a general population. Right, so here we go. So my plan for today. So I will first do a very, very brief introduction because we don't have a lot of time. I'll do a very brief introduction on what I'll be talking about meaning revisions and a slightly less loaded explanation about meaning perversions. I am interested and inspired by writings of people in the past, mostly during the 20th century, and how they describe, usually in very metaphorical ways, what they felt as they suffered or lived through revisions or engineering of the meaning of words and semantic engineering that often also came with social engineering. So, and what I'm interested in is trying to find a way of understanding what it was that they were trying to describe in those metaphorical ways, right? Because there are different people giving similar descriptions, let's put it like that. So, and to try to advance a little bit more in this effort, which is a bit vague as it stands, I will today briefly look at how we understand differences in meaning in a language and in translation between different languages, and how these may often give rise to miscommunication unless we become aware of what those differences are and are able to demarcate them. And so these differences here, I'm merely understanding them as descriptive meanings that may vary without any evaluative component. But there may also be differences in evaluative meanings across languages or within the same language. And so in these cases, different issues come up. And so I will mention some examples that concern, some of them concern some examples that have been recently discussed in literature on slurs about words that in the same language different people regard differently. So a group of the population regards as derogatory and another group, or also competent speakers, don't regard as derogatory. And then I'll give an example about different speakers of different languages having words that are very similar, and how imposing a particular evaluative meaning on speakers of another language might be a form of coercive control. And so from these, I will try to extract some very preliminary conclusions about how meaning perversions may lead to this metaphor of a loss of a shared reality, which was part of the idea of what I wanted to capture and to flesh out in a less metaphorical way, or I'm trying to develop a view of that. So let's start. First points. What are the notions? So by meaning revisions, I will understand in a very general way proposals, and we can flesh out what these proposals are in different ways to change a current meaning of an existing word for particular purposes, right? So these proposals might just be ways in which words actually change meaning just because speakers start to speak in a different way, and this might happen in a very organic way, maybe starting with metaphors, but then perhaps evolving with into other kinds of changes. So for instance, fantastic used to mean imaginary, part of fantasia, or something that is imagined, and now just means, and indeed it means in many languages, means wonderful. So these are cases in which words have changed meaning throughout history. So as Manuel mentioned, I have this other paper in which I try to spell out and try to understand what meaning perversions might be, and it might be hard to navigate, but I'm trying to sort of reduce the notion to something a bit more manageable. So by meaning perversion here, I will try to mean, well, I'll mean a revision or an attempt at a revision or an imposition of a revision. We'll have to figure out which ones are the best ways of understanding this. That on the one hand, it's a misapplication of the word. And if it was just that, we could say that, as some people I've discussed this with have suggested, that whether it's just a lie, we're just saying that something or someone is a so-and-so, and the person clearly isn't. And so in this application, are we saying something that is just false and therefore just a lie? But I want to say that it's not those cases, these cases that I have in mind are not just lies. They are more than that, or worse than that, because they are either changing or introducing or taking advantage of an existing evaluative or normative dimension, right? Its use of talking of someone that does not fall in the extension of the term, let's say, and talk of that something or someone as if it realizes a particular normative standard or value, which that something or someone does not realize. So this is what is the perverted nature of this, is this starting to presuppose that the particular something or someone that the speaker is talking about realizes some norm or value, which the target of the word doesn't satisfy. Maybe this will become clearer with examples. So this is an example that I'm very fond of from cartoonist Jesse Fleming. We could imagine that we are improving the meaning of equality by nominating someone to represent equality. So this would be a merely symbolic change as to what equality is rather than actual changes in equality. So this is a very fine example, but here are many other examples from politics and history. There have been, and there still are, places in the world where people who are opponents or dissidents of particular regimes are called enemies of the people, although the people in question are not enemies of the people. They are named enemies of the people and thereby become targets of attacks. There are totalitarian regimes or authoritarian regimes that call themselves democratic or popular republics, and have been across history as well, and they are neither democratic or republics in any sense of what a republic might be. There are coerced public displays of obedience to a state, an authoritarian state that might be called the free elections, and has Masha Gessen as described with respect to so-called free elections in the former Soviet Union. She says that this description of that public display eviscerated the words election, free, expression, citizen, and will, and it left the thing itself undescribed. There are other examples like cases where 30% or less of popular vote sometimes is represented as a popular, giving the people who thereby gain power as having a popular mandate where they don't represent even half the population. And we have even more modest cases where, for instance, we might have, imagine a corporate marketing for-profit campaign that says, oh, we are for women's rights, say, and to sell God knows what makeup, and present it as taking part in a human rights struggle or the fight for women's rights, whereas the only thing that is being done is trying to sell makeup. So there are a range of cases that I would include under the description of a meaning perversion. In her book, The Future is History, Masha Gessen gives further examples of this. For instance, she says the Soviet regime had robbed people not only of their ability to live freely, but also of the ability to understand fully what had been taken from them and how. This was an attack on the humanity of Russian society, which lost the tools and language to understand itself. So this is the tools needed to understand for society to understand itself, and what is lost in the loss of ability to understand fully what was taken from them. These are part of the things that I want to come to better grips with, let's put it like that. So what are the kind of expressions that people use? So Gesson talks of a lost tools of a language and the language to understand oneself. In other places, she talks of an impoverished experience. Victor Klemperer, in The Language of the Third Reich, talks about a loss of what was formerly before was common property. They talk of destitute languages where words' meanings have been eviscerated and leaving the thing itself undescribed. So these are the cases, and I want to say that we shouldn't do this. A political strategy or an initiative that does this kind of things is not a revision that should be done. Let's put it like that. So let's go and look at more common, less complicated and loaded cases. So in a language, there are many words that are ambiguous, right? And we can easily diagnose ambiguity in a language if we try to translate. This was something that Kripke had already argued in discussion with Donlan about different kinds of meanings. So this example is one that happened to me. When the first time I went to Greece, I was having a ball trying to read everything that was written in Greek, because I have a very basic knowledge of the Greek alphabet. And so I was trying to translate things. And so things like on the subway, when you see Exodus, and oh my God, that's exit. The Exodus is exit. That's fantastic. So I was walking around on the street one day, and then I saw this thing called, I don't know if this is the right pronunciation, but I read as ethnike trapeza pis elados. And I took it like ethnical, elados must be Greek. And then all of a sudden I thought, oh, Greek National Bank. That's what it is. So trapeza, which is the word that gave rise to our trapeze in English, trapecio in Portuguese or Spanish, also means a bench, which in Portuguese means banco, as does in Spanish, but also means bank or banco. So you see that the English translation makes clear, disambiguates the three readings. The Portuguese and Spanish translation only disambiguates between one reading and not the other two, and then you still keep the ambiguity between bench and banco, right? When people learn second languages, however, or within different idiolects within the same language, for instance, in North American English and English in the UK, and perhaps even within different idiolects within the UK, there's a possibility of miscommunication when people don't realize that words that might seem to mean exactly the same actually don't mean exactly the same and might have slightly different extensions and sometimes larger differences in extension. So this shows up in many different types of cases. So for instance, words like arena and garrafa. Arena in English comes from Latin, but means stadium. Arena in Spanish means sand, which did exist in the Roman stadiums at least, right? So these, like many other examples for us, when we are learning English as speakers who are not native English speakers, gives rise to confusions, often to confusions, and to slows down processing and understanding. Garrafa is Portuguese for bottle, so the 1.5 liter bottle at the bottom. But as I found out in Spain, being married with a Spanish speaker, if he asks me to buy a garrafa of water, I will bring the 1.5 liters, but what he was asking me to buy was a 5 liter bottle, right? Which is a very different kind of thing. In different countries, you might have other differences, like bonnet. Bonnet in the UK and in the US means different things. One is something you wear on a hat. The other thing is something that exists in cars. Pants notably mean different things in the UK and the US. And then you have issues of translations of words that are related and might have the same etymology, and then in translation they mislead us. So another example with Spanish and Portuguese, for instance. So when I started to learn Spanish, I asked, how do you say glass, meaning a glass from which to drink water? So I learned that the first, I don't have a mouse to point out, but never mind. I learned that the normal water glass was a vaso. That sounds a bit like a vase in English, but it's a vaso. And then because in Portuguese, we don't discriminate between a wine glass and a water glass, I was using vaso for everything. Whereas in Spanish, these are very different things. A water glass and a wine glass are very different things. So again, we have here my misunderstanding and my generalization. So in Spanish, the wine glass is a copa, which sounds like the Portuguese for water glass, for vaso, to add to the confusion. So we have words that might have similar origins. They might, etymologically, they might have evolved from the same roots. They have close enough meanings. And when we, as second language, acquire a second language, we have often trouble in picking out exactly when and how to use the word, although for the majority of the cases, we will pick the right stuff. We will refer to the right kinds of things, to the right categories. But often there will be misunderstandings, and these will be translated in slowing down processing and communication. So for instance, here's Barbara Malt with a chapter in the book that, as Manuel mentioned, I edited with Åsa Wigforss. Barbara says she works on these differences of how you can map thoughts to words, let's say, in cross and track cross-language differences, learning and communication. So she says, when native and non-native speakers of a language interact, or when monolinguals of one language interact with bilinguals whose use of that language has been influenced by another, differences in word choice can arise. These differences may lead to occasional miscommunications or at least some short delays in comprehension, as in some observed cases of utterances by non-native to native English speakers. Put the dishes in the closet. What? Do you have a chair on the plane? Buy some paper glasses for the drinks, or get a bonnet for the swimming pool. Of course, we've already noted that native monolingual speakers of the same language sometimes also differ among themselves in word choice, and across dialects of the same language, differences can be equally or more acute. So native speakers of American versus British English, for instance, would interpret the nouns in these sentences differently. Put on a jumper, lift the bonnet, get some trainers, serve the biscuits. Okay, so those were the cases in which we can see that slight differences in meaning across dialects or across language, or when we acquire a second language, and native and bilingual speakers also will often sometimes do this, give rise to possibilities of miscommunication, right? Where the words that we're using seem to be the same words. Now, add a level of complexity here. What if there is a difference in evaluative meaning, right? And what is it that this adds to the possibility of miscommunication and to further possibilities of conflict or control? So there are variations, and language also evolves in how it associates value to particular words. So here's Joshua Glasgow saying, as we all know, sick used to just mean ill. Now, at least among certain young people, I don't know if that's still true, but it was at the moment when his paper was published. Now, it, like bad, also means good, at least for some people in some cases. Of course, this will also lead to possibilities of miscommunication and misunderstanding. In a paper that is forthcoming, Danzeman is talking about words in a language that serve both to derogate a given group of people, but then also are used by the group themselves to refer to themselves in a non-derogatory way. So the use of Țigan in Romanian roughly translates a gypsy. And by the way, this is similar to the Spanish gitano and to the Portuguese cigano. They also sound alike, these words. So the derogatory use of Tsigan is widespread and permeates most aspects of Roma lives. However, while its derogatory use is very hard to contest, a number of members of the Roma community in Romania use Tsigan to identify as belonging to the ethnic group. So it's used as an identification, not to derogate themselves. This is similar to Gitano in Spanish or Portuguese, as I say, although in a recent article, Elena Castroviejo and Agustin Vicente and Catherine Fraser, I think, argue that these are words that are not slurs, but that can be used as slurs or to derogate when used in particular ways. So then in another recent paper, René Bollinger considers cases that are similar to Dan Zeman's, slightly different because the Roma case is very specific, but she considers similar cases where you have words in a language which some speakers see as slurs and other speakers don't see as slurs, and both groups of speakers are arguably competent speakers. So what she argues in that paper is that those different groups of speakers have, so the people who don't see the words as slurs have compelling reasons to avoid using the words, even if they're not linguistically mistaken. So perhaps they have moral reasons to not use the words. Oh my God, I've already spoken for 20 minutes. Okay, so I want to get into the cases that I'm really interested in, and I'm going to use the full half an hour, if that's okay, because I want to finish the interesting cases, the problematic cases that we could include. So people in the UK might be familiar, as people in the Spanish-speaking world are also familiar with this recent case. Edinson Cavani is a Uruguayan footballer who's a striker at Manchester United. After some games, some Spanish speaker celebrated him, as you can see in this caption from some Instagram account, something like "Así te quiero, matador," or something like "This is how I want to see you." Well, matador, you can infer what that means, and it's a compliment. And so he replied in Spanish, "Gracias, Negrito," shaking hands. For Spanish speakers, there's nothing wrong with this, and it's all nice, friendly, camaraderie, etc. This is what happened afterwards. So we had the FA was stunned by Manchester United's lack of media training for Edinson Cavani and accepted his claim Negrito was a friend's lifelong nickname, but still banned him for 3 games for racist Instagram post. What is going on? Uruguayan teammates come together to slam the English FA and accuse them of a discriminatory act. An incredible letter claiming ban Man United stars Negrito post isn't racist. Oh dear. Man United match winner Cavani risks FA investigation with racially insensitive social media post. Edinson Cavani says he accepts 3-match ban for his Gracias Negrito, etc. And then he had to go sensitivity training. What is going on? Let's clarify first something. Negrito in Spanish is not racist. This is Atahualpa Yupanqui. Atahualpa Yupanqui was an indigenous Argentinian. There are very few people, or there have been very few people of that. He did a big ethological work of collecting traditional songs across Latin America. And this song, which is a lullaby, Duerme Negrito, I don't think I have the time to. Let me see if this works. It doesn't work. Never mind. Oh, it does work. Let me put it in the middle. Basically, what he's saying is that he picked up this song from a woman who was babysitting a small black boy, baby, and singing this lullaby about telling the boy to go to sleep because his mother was working in the fields, she wasn't getting paid, and she will bring him all nice things. And as he sings, let me see if you can hear this. I don't know if I can find the right. Duerme, que tu mamá está en el camino. So just to make sure, I think that virtually all Spanish-speaking children around the world have heard this song as a lullaby. My daughter definitely did. And it's, of course, not a racist song, if there was any doubt about it. They're calling people negro, negrita across Latin America is common. It's a sign of affection, of love, of friendship, of camaraderie. Here's another example. This is from a documentary. Cool. This doesn't work. This one doesn't work. No. Oh, it does work. Let me put it forward now. We're going to start singing in a second. Let me put it forward. Here we go. Here we go. Well, they use, of course, negro and latinas negras, and this is not racist. I recommend that you see the video because it's fabulous. Also the documentary, and it's fabulous, and again, not racist. So what's going on in the example with Cavani and the Manchester United and the FA in the UK? So Negrito is used across Latin America to express affection, friendship, love, camaraderie. In English, words with the same etymology and extension are racial epithets, as we all know. So there's a disagreement between the Uruguayan Football Association, who complained to the FA, the Uruguayan Language Association, who are competent in Spanish, and then the FA in the UK, who are not competent Spanish speakers. Right. So the English speakers who wanted to punish Cavani are wrong. They're wrong about what the word means. They're wrong about Cavani doing something racist. So punishing Cavani with a 3-game suspension, forcing him to retract and do sensitivity training is punishing for something he didn't say, didn't mean, and didn't intend. Why? One wonders. So what do slurs mean? In a recent paper with Manuel Garcia Carpintero, we give an account of the meaning of slurs that's relying on a certain expressive or normative presupposition. And we define the derogation that is presupposed and that is as in terms of a constitutive norm that goes something like that. The meaning of the derogation is that one must derogate a given group on account of their having a certain features, only if the group has those features and contempt fits a group with those features. The meaning of the N-word in English is such that it presupposes the fittingness of contempt or disgust or both towards Black people. Not so with the meaning of the negrito word or negro or negra in Spanish. So requiring a Spanish speaker to retract the use of one, gracias negrito, with the handshake, is forcing the Spanish speaker to acquire this racist presupposition into his idiolect, which lacks it. It is insensitive to the distinct practices of another discursive community, and it presupposes a superior value in the social practice of the Anglophone world. So Cavani's punishment comes from a culturally dominant, or imperialistic maybe, attitude that requires conformity from different linguistic communities around the world in different languages to the Anglophone world's own racial norms, which are not ideal, let me add, okay? I'm not saying that there's no racist in other countries, there's racism everywhere, it's just different in how it manifests itself, right? So this is my view on the Cavani case, but I think it's also useful that we can extract something for the meaning perversions case. So what can we learn from these kind of examples to this metaphorical way of speaking of a loss of a shared reality? So recall that I introduced meaning perversions as meaning revisions that misapply a given word and then change its evaluative or normative dimension, right? The word or term is used to talk of something as if it realizes a normative standard or value, which that something does not realize. When I introduced this, I had in mind examples like free elections in the USSR or in North Korea, or words like enemy of the people, right? So this thing that the speaker is trying to refer to is not a free election, does not realize the presupposed value that free elections allegedly have. So what is different in this case? So unlike the enemy of the people case, or in the gracias negrito, the extension of the term in Spanish is not required to change. It does not lie. You're not telling anyone a lie if you're calling someone negrito or negrita or negra. What is it that is common? What is common here is an introduction of a normative presupposition that is being forced on the native Spanish speaker. A normative presupposition that the extension of the word as now used realizes a value or norm. So Cavani is forced to accept that in calling someone Negrito, it's presupposed that someone deserves derogation, because that's what is the word, the meaning of a translation of the word in English, or something related with the same etymology. Citizens are being forced to accept that in calling someone enemy of the people, it's presupposed that someone deserves punishment, very serious and the worst kind of punishment that the state could do, which again is not right. So maybe this helps us in understanding the point of Victor Klemperer about when he was talking about how the Nazi Party changed the meaning of words. He said that the party commandeers that which was previously common property and steeps words, groups of words, and sentence structures in poison. So this poison, I would like to say, what he's here calling poison are these evaluative presuppositions that don't fit, are inadequate as an assessment or a normative requirement on the thing that we're talking about. So how do you get to the loss of shared reality? This is more or less tentative. So we have meaning revisions that are imposed on speakers. They are forced engineering, let's say, involved introduction of evaluative presuppositions, where we have several risks. We have a meaning change that might lead to miscommunications, as happens in the bilingual speaker cases. It is coerced, and so it clashes with speakers' autonomy as speakers entitled to their own language. The coerced meaning change adds or changes a value or normative standard that isn't fitting to the concrete features of the reality that we're talking about. And because it is coerced, it is subordinating and requiring conformity to alien values, or it destroys pre-existing customs, or undermines the capacity for deliberation of a given population. So these would be the features of how you achieve this loss of a reality that speakers would talk about. And this falls broadly into a debate that Hannah Arendt, a discussion that Hannah Arendt was developing in a long article was planned to be a short book called Introduction into Politics, when what she's doing here is debating what freedom means and has meant across the history of philosophy and politics, and how for the Greeks, to be free was to be a citizen of the polis, and you could only be a free person or free citizen if you lived among those who were like you. And then she's discussing how this changed when we started to understand freedom as spontaneity and individual autonomy. And then she tries to carry this debate to the discussion of freedom of speech. And so she says, the point is rather that we know from experience that no one can adequately grasp the objective world in its full reality all on its own. If someone wants to see and experience the world as it really is, it can do so only by understanding it as something that is shared by many people, lies between them, separates and links them, showing itself differently to each and comprehensible only to the extent that people can talk about it and exchange their opinions and perspectives with one another, over against one another. Only in the freedom of our speaking with one another does the world as that about which we speak emerge in its objectivity and visibility from all sides. So this is an argument for freedom of speech that is different from the standard arguments of freedom of speech, but also an argument against forced or coerced meaning revisions, those that deny people the possibility of debating their own reality as they live it. And oh my God, this misformatted my references for some reason. Anyway, thank you very much. Gracias.